So that helps me segue into the piece I did this week for the Border Chronicle called "The Long Distance Run," and it's sort of a reflection from my road trip to Denver in mid-July, where I found out about this dark chapter in U.S. history called the Sand Creek Massacre that I had never heard of. It happened during the Civil War in 1864, and I learned about it from an exhibit at the Colorado History Center, which I really recommend to anybody who visits Denver. It's very cool, and they have an exhibit there on the Sand Creek massacre, which and what happened there was this corrupt U.S. Army Colonel Chivington, he kind of sounds like a villain, right? Colonel Chivington ordered his troops to massacre 230 innocent Arapaho and Cheyenne women, children, and elders. And fortunately, there was a captain there, Captain Silas Soule, who I kind of have a crush on now. He refused the order, his superior's order, and he held his troops back. And then he testified afterward in a military tribunal, and the whole country learned about what Chivington did. You know, this massacre of innocent people, and Chivington was forced out of the military. Well, he resigned, but he never went to jail. You know, he never served a day in jail for the massacre, and sadly, Captain Soule was killed, I think, in retaliation, and his killers never brought to justice. But had you ever? When did you learn about this in Colorado history about the Sand Creek Massacre? Because I
I'm embarrassed to say, but I really didn't learn about it in school. I didn't hear about it until I was in college. I had assigned to me an article that appeared in Mother Jones by Verlin
Mhm.
Klingberg, I believe. Um, that makes a great argument. I recommend anyone who's interested to look this piece up because it made an argument that really resonated with me as someone, from Colorado, that said that the Sand Creek massacre and sort of the general process of violence and erasure that it was part of means that Colorado really has a much less present indigenous history than the surrounding states. Like if you go to Arizona, New Mexico, Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, um, indigenous history and present day culture is much more present than it is in Colorado. Colorado was, I think, from its territorial era, much more committed to violence and erasure. Um, and the Sand Creek Massacre is one of the sort of emblematic, really just horrible events of that.
Yeah, I mean the witness testimony from Captain Soule to another superior about what happened is just oh my God, you can't even believe it. The letter is there, and I linked to it in the piece that I wrote called "The Long Distance Run." And you all may be asking, well, why is the Border Chronicle writing about something that happened in Colorado? It's because I have been thinking a lot lately about, we have many dark chapters in US history, and obviously we're embarking on a new chapter, a very dystopian chapter in US history. The pages haven't been written yet, but we know it's not good. All the ingredients are there for tragedy. And how do you how do you weather something like that? How do you document it? How do you find hope? You know, and how do you cope with it, basically? So um you think about this massacre that happened 160 years ago, and many white Americans still won't accept that it happened, or they don't believe it. But indigenous Americans have held this truth for more than 160 years, and so they've organized a healing run where they run for several days over many hundreds of miles to remember their ancestors and to remember sacred places along the way. And that got me thinking, to talk to various long-term border human rights activists that I've known for many years who have been in this for at least 30 years, organizing for human rights and civil rights on the border. And, how are their communities coping? What are they seeing? How are they finding hope? How are they drawing energy, to be able to continue to fight when it feels like all the rights that have been won since the Civil Rights Act and everything is just being rolled back and trampled on. And I got some really great responses from people. That's in our piece this week in the Border Chronicle, the long distance run. Um, Interestingly, and I ended up calling it the long distance run because the Arapaho organized this healing run. And then the first thing I hear from Pedro Rios, who's a longtime activist in San Diego, is I'm a long distance runner, you know. So I kept hearing this repetition of people who run for meditative sort of healing reasons. Um, Also, America Garcia Graywall had a really great uh, idea. She's an Eagle Pass, and you know she heads up um, the Frontera Federation and Border Vigil, and she trained in disaster preparedness. So she's blending like disaster preparedness protocols with therapy, which I thought was really interesting. So yeah, some really, really great ideas from people in border communities. And yeah, so I encourage everybody to read the piece if you want to learn about a horrible chapter in our history, but, uh, America persists. We all continue and, um, we'll get through this. Yeah, Apache stronghold runners. Yeah, I mean, I think running, I know the Tohono O'odham also have a run that they do, into Mexico as well. And now I want to segue into something a little bit sunnier. Caroline did a really great piece in Mexicali, on, well, I'm gonna let you talk about it. Talk about your trip to Mexicali, what that was like, and about your piece, which is great.
I've got a leaf blower like in the window right behind me, so I think I better keep talking for a couple more minutes.
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you. Um, of course, there has to be a leaf blower outside. Uh, the Tohono O'odham run is this week, and the Apache run. Oh, thanks, Lizzie. Yeah. So,
Right. I think I can come back now, Melissa.
okay.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that. So
we're gonna.
I didn't expect that to be like truly like 3 feet from my shoulder. I heard it in the distance coming closer and closer and closer, and then I couldn't even hear you. But now I would be happy to talk about Mexicali.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about your trip to Mexicali, and you actually have another piece coming out next week too from that trip. If you want to um, also tease that a little bit after you tell us about the really cool stuff that you wrote about this week.
Yeah, Border Chronicle readers are going to be getting a healthy dose of Mexicali. I went there in over Memorial Day weekend in May. And I had a few missions. Part of it was to see the Colorado River Delta, which I've reported on before. Um, Part of it was to report on the Mexicali experimental project, which you're going to be reading about next week. And another thing that had piqued my interest about Mexicali was that it has one of the highest. It's one of the cities with the highest heat records in North America. So only San Luis Rio Colorado, which is in Sonora and it's just about an hour from Mexicali, has a higher heat record. Phoenix does have the highest average temperature of any city in North America, but these have the records. The second hottest city in North America, and I was really curious about cyclists there because you of course see cyclists on the streets, and pedestrians and urban, people who are thinking kind of creatively about urban space there. Something that maybe just to help everyone picture Mexicali is that the cities in Mexico's north are somewhat, American Sunbelt esque. They're very car dependent, very boulevards, limited public transportation. They're also arid, so if you picture a Tucson or a Phoenix, it's a little bit denser, but it's not so different. Um, and so it's really challenging to be a cyclist or a pedestrian or a user of public transportation, just like it is challenging in the Sunbelt cities of the United States. And what I learned from Denai Valdez, who I interviewed this week, is that actually when they started talking to people about what were the biggest barriers to being a cyclist, the heat was not the first thing they said. People, she described it as people have hacks. They have breathable clothing, or they stay really hydrated, or they only go during certain hours of the seasons. They take a break for the summer. What people really find as the biggest obstacle is the street design. And so she became a really big advocate for improving bike lanes, improving pedestrian infrastructure, and eventually improving shade. She described, you started as a cyclist, and that leads you to street design, and street design leads you to shade, and shade leads you to thinking about water harvesting. So these sort of urban planning issues are all really connected, and in sort of being a cyclist and having this very like quotidian interaction with the city helps you think at this much more holistic scale.
I really like that, how, yeah, the bike riding leads to the shade, leads to water collection, and I love this, like, expanding sort of ecosystem, and I love the fact that they planted palo verdes all up and down, like, a major boulevard, right? And now she's saying that they flower, and so they have like, a change of season, which they
Mhm.
hadn't really had before, so I thought that was really cool, and, yeah, I asked you, did you bike in Mexicali? Did you
I wish I had been able to bring my bike next time. I was just taking a car that didn't have space for it, and I was going with other people this time. But I hope to in the future. But yes, anyone can read in the interview that the Denai's organization, which is it's called La Bici, but it stands for Laboratorio para la Invención de la Ciudad, so Laboratory for Invention of the City. Um, it the organization helped to replant. There had been a median on a major boulevard in Mexicali that was planted with tamarisk, which, for those of you who are not familiar, it's a very invasive
Yeah.
plant, a shrub, tree type plant, came originally from Siberia or Central Asia, that area. And it's, um, you see it all over the Southwest, but sometimes you don't even, it's so ubiquitous that you don't even really pay attention to it. But it's kind of like a
Yeah.
grayish, very kind of
Frondy, isn't it
thorny.
kind of frondy?
Yeah, it's not a pretty tree or bush particularly.
Yeah.
And so the city had torn those out in the 60s or 70s, and it had just been these sort of empty flower beds. And so her organization replanted them with palo verdes, which of course are a native tree. But I think that was a new species to many of the people who were seeing them be planted. So at first people were kind of skeptical, like, oh, these don't look that much better than the tamarisks. And now they've grown in and they flower yellow every spring. And it's, in like, it's very famous, for instance, that in Mexico City, you have the jacaranda bloom,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is this,
Beautiful.
massive purple bloom in Mexico City. And so she
Yeah.
said, now we kind of have this similar event where that whole street turns yellow by the palo verdes in the spring. So I think that, uh, yeah, it's like a really neat initiative.
Yeah, it's funny that they look with suspicion upon the native Palo Verde, right? Like, what is this tree? It's like, it's actually from here. I just think, I love focusing on these community-oriented solutions, especially when, nothing is working, it feels like at the federal level. It's really great to see all these great things happening at the community grassroots level.
Yeah, and
Um
I mean, I think that part of what was inspiring to me about the interview was that this was grassroots collective activism, and it also did have real success collaborating with local government and also pushing local government to change. So I think they really did see effective change.
Yeah, that's great. And then you've got another piece on Mexicali coming out next week, right? Do you wanna talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, we can give a little teaser. And also, it looks like one of the researchers that I talked to for that article is going to be able to join us in this video next week, which is really exciting.
Oh, great.
Right now, there is an exhibit in Mexicali that previously was shown in San Diego, and it's later going to go to Mexico City. But it has to do with this really unusual architectural project that happened in Mexicali, where the Mexican state agencies in the post-war period started building a lot of worker housing, especially for like low-level government employees. Um, and obviously most of this took the form of, concrete block apartments like in the French or Russian, Soviet style. But
Yeah.
in Mexicali, they had very curious idea to invite
Mm.
Christopher Alexander, who was an architecture professor at Berkeley, and had written these very philosophical books about, resident designed housing,
Mhm.
to come to Mexicali and do this thing called the Mexicali Experimental Project. And so 5 families actually worked with him to build their own homes. And those homes are still standing. They've been very modified, but the families are still living in them.
Wow.
And 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 uh, an organization in San Diego called Insight worked with an artist named Pastizal Zamudio from Mexicali, who happened to have grown up in one of those apartments. And some researchers, one of them is Felipe Oranzans, who is the one who might join us next week. And they've made an exhibit about the history of those housing projects. And so I read about that for next week. That's just the teaser.
Yeah, avant-garde architecture in Mexicali. That's great. Boy, they're really doing some aggressive landscaping there outside the library.
Really not expecting this. Yeah, it's there's not even really anything to leaf blow.
Yeah. So check out the articles that we've got in the Border Chronicle this week, and of course Caroline's piece on Mexicali avant-garde architecture next week, and we'll have something also on the National Defense area in the Rio Grande Valley. And I just want to highlight we have links to other important border news stories in our roundup, which I'll be posting right after this video. And I just want to mention 3 of those pieces. So much is happening so quickly. Um, but 285 acres in Yuma County has now been converted into a national defense area under control of the Navy. So that's Roosevelt Reservation land, I believe. That's now, so they've got like a national defense area in Yuma. 1.2 billion to go to Fort Bliss to build a detention camp for 5,000, which is what the hell? It's very alarming, and that's supposed to open in 2027. This is according to a piece in the Texas Tribune. And also there's this really bizarre case that actually occurred here, south of Tucson at the border wall with the Tucson humanitarians who were there doing water drops, and which they've done for years and years and years. It's public land, but some of the humanitarians had a gun pulled on them, which is really scary, by these unarmed men, and they thought they were border militia guys, but it turned out that they were part of Homeland Security Investigations, which is a division of ICE, and they were in an unmarked car. They didn't have uniforms on, and so they actually detained, I believe, the humanitarians, and it was very scary. So the humanitarians have filed a complaint against HSI, and we'll see how that plays out. So, like I said, there's a lot of volatility. A lot of things are happening really quickly, and so we're trying to keep an eye on everything that's happening. What is that movie? Everything All at Once. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning for the Border Chronicle Weekly Roundup. And I'll be posting right after this. So, check out the stories, check out the links. And if you are so inclined, please support our work at the Border Chronicle so we can keep reporting these stories by becoming a paid subscriber. We really appreciate it. And thanks so much, Caroline, for joining me. Now I will let you continue your vacation.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, see you all next week.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.